Tell me about the current culture we're seeing of kind of the wokeness, the left. We're seeing a lot. America seems to embody it, and I'm looking at a country I used to live in, and it's hard to even fathom what's going on there. I used to live in California. I used to live in New York City and Wall Street, and we're seeing, like I said, this wokeness, almost this Marxist revival. And how do you see that affecting some of the things we're talking about today, which is the family and religion? And are they two different things? Are they in opposition? What are your thoughts?
I would say yes, they are. And they are in opposition. I would say you could describe what's happening today as sort of cultural Marxism. I think one of the marks of Marxism is life is a continuous conflict. There is always a conflict between the victim and the oppressors, and it's as simple as that. But what it does is it narrows down the field of freedom, actually, freedom of what you're thinking, freedom of what you're saying. So it becomes very bland. It becomes, woke, as you say, and you got no platform, etc. You're getting this very narrowing down as to what human life is. Of course, you've got the sort of Animal Farm or 1984, all these sort of things where, who decides? And you've got this idea of sort of purist thinking. There are those who have purist thinking and everybody else has to learn about it. So there's a sort of dictatorship of the purist thinkers. And I think it's actually, I've come to the conclusion that the main enemy of this is actually Christianity, because where I was talking about before, that freedom that you get, we aren't called to judge, actually. We aren't called to wag our finger at the world. Jesus didn't wag his finger at the world. Paul didn't. Paul said, we should behave like this. We should care for one another. We should, we should build each other up, etc. And other people will see us and want to join us. He didn't wag his finger at the Greeks and said, you shouldn't have slavery, or you shouldn't have homosexuality, or you shouldn't do any of these. He never did anything of that. So Christians aren't called to do that. I think one accepts the world as the world is, which is what Genesis 3 says, all right? But just, we should be light and salt, and we have that freedom, that wonderful diversity that is creation of the human race, the human character, the human gifts. And coming back to debate, about the House of Lords, instead of being shut down, the debate, I was the main opposition, actually, in the House of Lords to the Divorce, Dissolution, and Separation Bill, which was no-fault divorce, in other words. And the main review which the government was basing this law on had been produced, actually, by Exeter University, and it was very much, we should have no-fault divorce, it reduces conflict at the time, and that sort of thing. So you had a lot of the lawyers and the judges all for it. I was very much alone in a way. There were a few friends on my benches. And when I was speaking, because they knew I was going to oppose it, when I was speaking in the second reading about this, the actual main writer of the review was blogging. We can't let this bill be hijacked. We can't let this debate be hijacked by a right-wing Christian evangelical. And
you.
That was me. Well, right. It was obvious. There was nobody else. And the interesting thing is, would that have been written if I'd been a Muslim? Or would that have been written if I'd been a Jew? It was actually written because Christians are soft. They're an easy target. And actually, I quoted that back in the report stage, I think, of the bill. I said, while I was speaking, this was being written. And I said, I'm not trying to hijack a debate. I'm trying to have a debate instead of it just being closed down. And that's what the woke is. It just closes down debate, which is a very bad thing for the human race. It just gets rid of all that diversity, that richness, that actually Christianity in its exploration, discovery of what the Lord, I mean, did the Lord know the internet was there beforehand? Of course he did. I'm very thankful that we discovered it, and we discovered things like Zoom before COVID hit us all, because that made a good deal of difference. But it just closes these things down.